Well, everybody, it's a great honor today. We have with us Leo Bachman, who is he's the founder of the Israel Innovation Institute and also several successful Israeli companies, which we'll talk about. Not that it's so important, but he also happens to be a neighbor of mine, which is nice. It's good to have you with us today, Leo. And for those of you who came to the summit in 2019, Leo spoke at the summit too and did a fantastic job. So, Leo, why did you found the Israel Innovation Institute?
The question where to raise my kids was a pretty big question. I was born in Russia and didn't want that my kids will grow up as immigrants. And when we've decided that we will stay in Israel, next step was to say that, okay, then we have to do something about it and to make sure that Israel will remain a place that we're at least proud of. Now I'm coming from the high-tech sector, and at least the reality that I knew was that, well, that we've called it dual economy. You know, there is this high-tech sector with all the good stories about it, and there is other reality, which is usually much, much harder, with much less opportunities. And I felt that if we will be able to take this other reality and first of all reposition it and prepare the infrastructure, then first of all we'll be able to channel at least part of the Israeli high-tech from web applications and mobile and things that most of the humanity does not really need, no judgment, to areas of more importance, like healthcare, like education, like agriculture and stuff like that.
So healthcare and education. So if I'm following you, you're basically saying, okay, Israel has a lot of innovation, a lot of high-tech innovation, but our healthcare and education, other government services is still very low-tech. So what can we do to integrate this amazing technological innovation into public services? Is
yes, in a way, but I think there is another layer which, you know, when you're looking on digital transformation in general, then all the innovation processes are pretty much different than, let's call it, the scientific ones. You know, in scientific, you are building huge amount of knowledge in universities, and someone would take this knowledge and commercialize it. On the digital world, it's completely different. I mean, I don't want to break myth, but most of the innovation in digital is not rocket science. It's much more applicative, and in order to create it and be effective, you need someone to work with. You need users. The cycles are much faster, and in order to create these areas, someone have to build it now. There are public areas which are much harder to operate it, and there are private sector areas, you know. Blockbuster, Netflix, in order to kill Blockbuster, didn't really need help. They did it pretty successfully. Right. And the same happened with education and with advertisement or fintech or whatever. In areas in which the payer is not the one who getting the service, in which the regulations are much harder, someone have to build these infrastructures. And we felt that Israel could be a good place to do this type of things, and this is why we established Israel Innovation Institute.
Okay, and so when I look at the Israel Innovation Institute, it looks like you're building not a community, but several communities. So you have, if I'm not mistaken, the motor vehicle community and these massive summits every year. What's the name of the?
EcoMotion.
EcoMotion, which I think is one of the largest summits around the world for digitization and innovation for motor vehicles. So you have motor vehicles, you have health, education, and agro-food tech, and then recently you've started some...
recently we've started Planet Tech and Desert Tech.
Planet Tech, that's interesting. What is Planet Tech?
Planet Tech is a new community around all the sustainability parts.
Green technologies, sustainability.
Green technologies. So we never touched it actually, because at least to my feeling, the digital parts of this world was on the spectrum between, I don't know, greenwash and Greenpeace. It's not something that interested us. And in the last year, I think, it's become a huge issue, a huge trend, that we are feeling that, first of all, Israel could and should play a role. And second, it's a huge opportunity. So we certainly wanted to take part of it.
So you start a community, and then that community has summits, and I'd imagine it probably has some type of social network, social network, and sharing of ideas, and so on and so forth. How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a great question, because we found, back then when we started with the idea, as usual entrepreneurs are doing, we didn't really think about how should we do it. We just said, okay, let's do something, and it started to roll.
Right.
This is why it took
That's
much
the Israeli
more.
way.
Yeah, exactly. This is why it took much longer and much more resources, but still we are here, so maybe we did something good. But basically, at the beginning, I was fortunate to have huge amount of people around me who really knew different pieces from economy, from sociology, from different places. And we brought them all together, and basically later on we found out that we basically built, I think you may call it a new methodology of innovation policy, meaning what countries, governments, public sectors, NGOs have to do in order to build this environment to flourish.
That's interesting. So let me, if I can interrupt, let's say at one of your summits, so you don't only have companies, and innovation managers in companies, but you also have public servants, like government people who are creating policy?
Yeah, okay. So the idea of the institute, and it is still evolving, but the basic idea actually haven't changed since the first days. We have 3 layers, I think, 3, yeah, kind of. One is a community development. The idea of the community, by the end of the day, is that people have to build this social glue. They have to trust each other, they have to collaborate. In order to do that, first of all, you need different types of people: university, investors, users, developers, etc., and the more the merrier. At least you need some beer to accelerate the relationship.
Beer makes good social glue.
Exactly, because we don't have time to wait. No, seriously. So this is one layer, and this is why the community part is really not homogenic. It's not just entrepreneurs. It's everyone. It's all. Imagine a thriving community. Go to the Silicon Valley in very specific areas. How does it look exactly? Now you want to do it exactly, either exactly or more or less with the same rationale in different areas. The second layer, it's a layer of, let's call it a policy work with government, because by the end of the day, we are looking on areas which are dramatically driven by policy. So under this roof, we are building national policy programs with the government. And I found out that it's much easier than I thought. Israel is a small place, so it's not such a big challenge. But we basically led the National Digital Health Program and few others. Now we are pushing a lot around environment. I think during the last 10 years, we've led something like 6 or 7 national programs like that, looking both on the policy level and on the applicative levels of the government itself.
I have to say, as an Israeli citizen, that my experience receiving public medical services has dramatically improved over the last several years, particularly in the area of digitization, that everything comes right to an app in your cell phone, including, you can have an ad hoc Zoom meeting with your family physician, right? I mean, and it seems to be working very smoothly. But you, kind of from a bird's eye view, I'm interested in these areas, the automotive, the health, the education, the agro, the desert tech, the planet tech. Which ones would you say, since you founded the Institute, have kind of moved the quickest, or you've seen the strongest?
So I'm entrepreneur. So first of all, we failed dramatically in education. We did establish a few good programs, but I think to me it's a failure. We did a good job in healthcare, but it was very inward focused. We're operating today with, I think, 95% of the hospitals in Israel, all the HMOs, building with them and basically for them open innovation platforms, identifying needs, pushing traffic of companies to work with the physicians on the ground. All these things, I'm coming as an entrepreneur with an idea. The fact that someone on the other side will have attention / will know how to work with me, it's not trivial at all, certainly not with such a busy systems. This is what the Institute is doing in Health IL. I think the impact there is huge. Frankly, I cannot honestly tell you that the specific application came out of it, but because we're looking on the garden itself, not on the flowers.
Right.
But I do think that the impact is there. From completely different perspective, I do think that the eco-motion grew very, very fast externally. I mean, I think we contributed to the position of Israel as a center for innovation for automotive. In the first days when we started to work with all the big companies, we literally had to develop huge amount of resources and time to drag them to Israel and explain them what Israel is somewhere between Jordan, Lebanon, and
these are motor vehicle manufacturing companies. I mean, all the big ones come to
today they all have development centers here. And now, when we started, GM was the only one.
Wow.
But on the other side, we did fail on the internal impact. As you know, last time when you tried to take your car and drive to Tel Aviv, I don't think that things changed, certainly not to the best.
Right.
So externally, I do think it was a success. And I think that the Planetech and the Desert Tech right now would be the new two areas of growth, and they are both expanding dramatically. I mean,
Amazing.
In a completely different scales than we used to see.
I've interviewed people from Mobileye, and I understand that Amnon Shashua drives to work in an automated vehicle, driverless vehicle, and they say that by the time our 12-year-old children are going to be our age, they won't need to sit behind a wheel anymore, that everything will be automatic. Do you think that's actually the case? Are we moving quickly in that direction?
Well, it's a great question, because I remember when we've opened the first, let's call it international eco-motion conference, I think it was like 7 years ago. So they've asked me to give the opening pitch. And this was the promise. Everyone spoke about that the day will come and everything will be autonomous. Immediate outcome was that we don't have to pick our kids from school anymore. The car will do it by itself. And frankly, as we all know, things takes much more time. And the idea, the fact that we already have technology doesn't really mean that all the different areas of the market structure, liabilities, energy, et cetera, actually will work so fast. And I think also Amnon Shashua himself, who is certainly one of the thought leaders in this area, and his contribution is huge. I think looking on their actions, and for me it's a wonderful lighthouse, I think they already also understood that the reality will look a bit different, a bit more modest, and much more fragmented.
Yeah.
So starting with on the other one side, and by the way, with huge impact on safety, the impact on safety is huge. I'm not so sure that it's less important than the fact that the car will go in by himself to pick up my kids. Let's put it under the right perspective. And I think that we all understand now that this world is much, much more complex and much more fragmented. And maybe the last thing, impacted by a lot of events that no one actually can or could or should predict.
Right.
So I think it's a bit more complex.
Interesting. I was sitting one time on a plane next to a guy. I think he was in the automotive industry, and he said, this was about probably 15 years ago. He said, within 10 years, all the cars will be flying cars. And I said, wow. I said, I just have one question for you. How do you put on the brakes? But I think, and I'm sure there are ways to put on the brakes for flying cars. You know, of course, I was joking, but I think there is an element to it takes time for those type of technologies to actually be integrated into everyday life and become a practical.
My day job is entrepreneur, and after 25 years of work, partly successful, partly not, I've learned that vision is a good thing to start with your day and a terrible one to move forward. I mean, you have to put your vision aside sometime and actually start be realistic and build with small steps reality. And when you are trying to grasp it all immediately, and in a way, I think the car industry and in a better place from one side and Mobileye from other side, I think we've tried to swallow too much. And I think that if we would be able to look at it much more realistically and do a more reasonable timeline with less enthusiasm and more reality, I think first of all we could impact on much more lives, which at least to me is more important. And second, I think that we could even achieve more both technologically and operationally. And operationally, of course, at least to me, more important. But again, the achievements were huge anyway. So eventually we won't have to drive to school to pick up our kids. Maybe it will be our grandkids, but still.
Right. So I'd like to talk if we could, about desert tech. That to me is very interesting. I mean, it's very interesting to me as an Israeli because over half of the land mass in Israel is desert, right? And then what do you do with the desert? I'm interested to know what desert tech even means. So
first of all, I'm interested as well. It's kind of a new buzzword. But I think that in the last year, basically, when we are very practical in the Institute. I mean, we are not singularity talking about what the future will bring. There is place for everything. I mean, but we are very, as we call it in Israel, tachles, and we're here to impact lives, not to develop technologies. We don't care about technology. I mean, it's just a tool. And a year ago, basically, actually, to me, the landmark was the changing administration in the White House, because the White House still has a huge impact on the business perception of this type of things. Even the European Union did unbelievable work in the last 20 years. No one really cared.
With reducing carbon,
all the carbon and all these areas. Yeah. So we've asked ourselves, and we on the business side, I had a company that dealing with optimization of production processes, and all of a sudden we started to feel a situation in which sustainability and I will get back immediately to desert tech because they're very well connected. All these areas started to move from kind of buzzwords of ESG reporting and stuff like that with no real impact to real operational items. First of all, measurable goals, and second, completely changing the reality. And around that, we started to see, okay, how can we take this trend and do something with it? Because it looked like it's about time. And the decision was that basically to divide between the pure environmental areas, and I also active here on the business side. It's a company that I'm building right now. And the other one are not just environmental. I mean, they're of course environmental, but they have something very specific. And the participants in these areas are more, let's call it, if our natural attention would be to North America, Europe, etc., here it's our natural attention would be to our Arab neighbors, Africa, and all these areas. And this is basically the decision was, because each one of these segments we found out that it is a bit different. So the real distinction between desert tech and planet tech, it's not a scientific one, absolutely not. And desertation is something which is pretty easy to see. You're flying and you actually see green become yellow. It means that the desert is here. And it comes with a lot of very unique challenges around food security, around water security, around we are participating in, I'm not so sure what does it mean participating, but we are participating in an unbelievable project of a great green wall, something that has been led by the UN. The reason why I'm saying I'm not so sure what does it mean is that a lot of these big projects usually not really leaving the market.
By green wall, you mean planting trees?
No. It's kind of a UN initiative to reduce the extend the timeline of dissertation and different areas around it. So there are 5,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 feet policy ideas, and then there are people who have to do something with these ideas, and this is where we are trying to contribute.
I mean, when I think about Israel, so when Mark Twain walked through Israel in the late 1800s, he wrote, "This is the most desolate place I've ever visited on planet Earth. I've walked for days and haven't seen one tree." And it turns out that the Ottoman Empire at that time would tax people's personal properties based on the amount of trees they had. It was idiotic. It was one of the worst tax ideas in the West. What did everybody do? Cut down their trees. And so, me growing up in the United States, you had all these synagogues, those little boxes that, with Karen Kayemet, and people would put in their quarters and everything. And I mean, Israel has 400 million more trees today than we had 100 years ago, which is a crazy number. But I think Israel has succeeded in changing desert into something else. And then if there's a way that can be replicated in other places in the world, it would be amazing. I mean, I'm sure you're talking about technology that goes far beyond just tree planting, but yeah.
Yeah, but just let's put it in the right perspective. The fact that a few strange people decided to cut a tree doesn't mean that we have a desert. It just means that we have a normal environment without a tree. Right. The problem about desertation is changing characteristic of soil, environment, weather, etc. It is a bit more complex than to plant a tree. And it's interesting that you've mentioned these blue boxes, because I deeply believe that this is exactly the time where we should change these blue boxes to green boxes.
Okay. What does that mean?
Oh, cool. So first of all, we have to decide if we want to do it with Karen Kayemet or just kill them, because it's about time to do it. But what the serious piece about it is that I really believe that all the environment and desert tech and all these elements are about to change our life, both as consumers, as developers, as policymakers, as people, as everything. And economically, I believe, and I can prove it, I think, so it's not just a belief, that it is about to be as big as the internet. And morally, I think that we have to do something about it. And the good piece about it is that you don't have to be evangelist anymore, because the reality is there, 50 degrees in Seattle, etc. We have enough examples. So it's on the table, on everyone's table. When we did this event around COP26, in Glasgow, so we partnered with a Scottish event. Every kid in Israel knew what is it about, as they knew about Bereshit project or any other place. So it's there. Everyone understands it. The opportunity is there. And by saying that it's about time to change the color of the box is exactly that. That I think that Israel has a huge potential, and to me potential also comes with responsibility to make an impact here. I mean, when Prime Minister Bennett said in Glasgow that Israel is about to be an innovation center for Planetech or environmental technologies, we actually wrote him the bullets. I never thought that he will take it so far. Because we never meant to say that Israel will lead this process, but we wanted to say that we have a responsibility to contribute.
It's hard for me to believe that a politician would exaggerate.
Yeah. Certainly not an Israeli one. Yeah. But seriously, I do think that the opportunity is there, and it is both economical and moral. And morally, it's responsibility, economically, it's an opportunity. And this is basically why I'm building Factoree. I mean, we can talk about it later, but around the institute, going back, I mean, we are building a lot of activities to make sure that every person in Israel who will decide, first of all, to dedicate his time to entrepreneurship, innovation, and all these things, will understand good enough the opportunities is in this area, will understand that it's not something small. You don't have to be a tree hugger anymore.
Right.
It's a huge financial opportunity as a starting point. And lucky us that in Israel, I think there is a growing number of people who prefer to do important things and not just to do, as I've said, web application and stuff like that, which is, there is still room for everyone. But I think that here in these areas, it's about, this is when we should start do things, and we're trying to contribute in these areas.
Fantastic. I mean, Arise is just a small organization. We're not the Israel Innovation Institute, but we like to talk about innovation for good, which is tackling the greatest crises facing humanity in a commercially viable way. And we focus on companies like that. And I think that's a good kind of pivot into the newest company that you're founded. I think it's fair to call you a serial entrepreneur because you've been my neighbor for a few years, and every time we talk, you have a new idea, a new company you're working on. So this new one that you said is called Factoree with an EE on the end, right? What does it do? What's the great challenge that it's tackling?
Yeah, first of all, I'm not so sure what is a serial entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs basically is a problematic character. I cannot do anything else, but it's not every time. I mean, every 6 years I'm starting a new cycle, more or less. To do it every time, it's a bit more problematic, although I do help others to build their own projects because I'm happy to see others suffer as well. But regarding Factoree, I think the reason why I've sold my part in the previous company and focusing right now on Factoree, actually to me this is going back to this huge trend and my feeling about the responsibility and the opportunity. I mean, when we're looking on the worldwide emissions, and today everyone is looking on the carbon footprint. No one said that this is the most important one, but it's certainly it's a good place to start the journey. So manufacturing, and mainly raw material manufacturing, is around 30% of the carbon footprint worldwide. And all the policies around carbon reduction are completely starting to change all the supply chain around the world and create huge demand to reduce carbon footprint and environmental footprint in general. The only problem is that no one knows how to do it and what does it mean, and how you can translate these high-level political versus policy statements to operational activity. No one went to manufacturers, actually analyzed their production processes, understood that in order that it is possible to reduce X and said, okay, let's reduce 1.5 to motivate them more. Basically what they did was the other way around. They said, okay, in order to make sure that the world won't hit in 1.5%, we have to reduce carbon footprint in 50%, blah, 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 and this would be the goals. The interesting part about it, if it would stay here, no one would care because it has nothing to do with reality. And there are enough examples of policies that has no connection to reality, just dying down the road. But what the interesting part in this situation was, first of all, as we said, 50 Celsius degrees in Seattle. So it's not a day will come. It's a reality.
And big chunks of the North Pole are now floating into the ocean.
Well, yeah, but here many people can explain different things. I don't know, but it is here. I don't think that someone would argue that we are already experiencing something, a dramatic something, but not less important, it came with a huge financial trend. And the financial trends both completely changing the production functions of all the materials throughout the supply chain, as a derivative of the mainly carbon footprint to start with. And the other side is also the understanding that the trend that most of the money or the predictions that big parts of the financial world will connect money that goes to the manufacturing world to environmental goals. And for us, it was, okay, wow, now we have a huge opportunity to impact.
Yeah, so I want to talk very practically. So let's say that I'm a manufacturer. I have a plant that has a significant carbon output into the environment. And now my governor or my prime minister just created a new policy that I'll start getting financial benefits, maybe tax benefits, which are becoming more and more prevalent in the world if I can cut back my carbon footprint. I come to Factoree, your new company. How can you help me?
So first of all, as such manufacturer, you have three major problems. One problem, you literally have no idea, data-driven, what are the carbon footprints that each product produce in your production processes. This is one problem. The second problem is that you have no real capability to translate the general purpose goals of reduction of 50% until 2030 and all these type of things to operational activities on the ground. And the last one, you have no idea how to budget it, etc. So what Factoree will do...
The analysis is important, excuse me for a second, because if I want to come and get that tax benefit, I have to show that I did something, and which means I have to know my carbon carbon footprint, right?
But today there are no infrastructures for that, because the only thing that you actually have is the ESG infrastructures that basically analyze what you've bought. That's it. And by the way, if you don't really want to improve, maybe it's good enough. But today you are forced to improve. And in order to improve, you need to translate very general statements on a board level to operational reality, which is completely different. So what Factoree is doing, we are basically have three layers. The first layer, we would come to the manufacturer facility, aggregate all the data, and basically analytically model all the production processes, okay? And by that, all the production processes, all the energy that has been consumed, all the relevant data around it, and in our language, will sign the carbon footprint of each production step, or each production process, or each production facility, or production site, on any, it's like a Lego, of your work. So first of all, we will give you a report, an ongoing one, of what exactly your carbon footprint. Later on, we will deal with waste, water, etc. This is one step. And where you are going to, the trend. The second element, we are starting to implement diagnostic tools to identify potentials for improvement. Think about it, you're going to a physician, family doctor, he can look at you, he can say, either give you a cure or send you to a specialist, but at least he's starting the process. So we are, in this case, a family physician, because we are identifying the major buckets of improvements and translating these buckets, which is the third layer, to effective interactions with service providers. I mean, we are talking mainly to US market. So, go to Rockwell Automation, who are, by the way, the leadership of Rockwell are my partners in this event, personally. They have huge portfolio of solutions, but the capability to link the huge amount of solutions to a very specific problem on the ground and to do an effective purchasing process and execution process in this level is very, very problematic for manufacturers. So we are doing reporting, a very deep reporting that creates us a very strong analytical capabilities and database of what is going on. We are building analytical tools to develop the diagnostic processes, and we are translating these diagnostic processes into a marketplace of providers that's supposed to dramatically accelerate the actual carbon reduction processes of manufacturers around the world. And of course, project that works out well, we can replicate to other sites and all this type of thing. So in a way, we are linking between the corporate level needs and the operational needs. Our customers, the paying customers, exactly as in the public sector, it would be the corporate level. We're working with CFOs and COOs of the organization. And on the other side, we're providing tools to the engineers on the ground to do everything they can while reduce carbon and emissions in general while preserving quality and efficiency.
Amazing. Amazing. It seems to me that you need the public sector to kind of walk step by step with you, because I mean, I'd like to believe that, you know, most of the CEOs and COOs out there have altruistic views on how they can improve the environment, but unless they receive some kind of incentives for reducing their carbon footprint, the question is if they'll have enough desire to, you know, to engage a company like you to make their processes better.
So, you know, first of all, it is already there, and this is a good part. We don't need the public sector did two things. First of all, he brought the EU public sector to work during the last 20 years to build the frameworks, and then he brought the US administration to accept it. So basically from 2023, you have to report on every product that will cross the borders on the amount of carbon footprint that this product has. And from 2025, you will start to pay as a starting point. And it's completely changing the production function and the pricing and everything. And this is why we are running ahead. And basically, in a way, right now we're working both with Deloitte and with KPMG to build the reporting standard, because Factoree, I would dare to say that, at least to the best of my knowledge, has right now the deepest analytical capabilities of the production processes themselves. And it's really fundamental, because in order to be able to report, you have to really understand what is going on. In order to improve, you have to be able to understand what is going on. And I think this is basically, I mean, I know that this is what we are doing. So the public sector already played its role, and moreover, I think also the financial sector played its role, because huge amount of money goes, and as you know, I'm coming from the high-tech sector, so as well as the VCs has been pushed by their limited partners to invest more money in green label from different kinds, exactly the same processes you can find from the other side of the fence of manufacturing. And one of the biggest problems of CFOs today is basically to understand the risk of the carbon footprint reduction and to be able to communicate this risk to the financial markets. And we are and without tools like Factorees or anyone else, but you have to go very deep in order to be able to do it. And it is becoming a huge risk. So it's not just about ideals anymore.
So as your friend and your neighbor, I think what you're doing right now is so important that in 5 or 6 years, when the next idea comes up, just try to push it away and continue doing Factoree.
I think that actually Factoree is something that is growing very fast, because, and I think it is most fast growing event that I was managing, mainly because of the urgency. And it is a pretty unique experience, because it's everything on steroids. And it is running very fast. We've just started basically a few months ago. We already have 3 initial customers, let's call it design partners. Syngenta Group, ICL Group, and Teva. We have a few collaborations also on a governmental level with the Australian government and a few others. Right now we're building the team and running very, very fast, and looking basically for 2 main things. First of all, we're still looking for design partners, and we hope to combine between the design partners and strategic investors.
When you say design partners, designing solutions to the...
No, sorry, yeah, maybe I'm using a term. Design partner is someone who is a manufacturer, who understands the need, and is willing to work with a startup who does not really have the full solution yet, but he understands that if he will be the first customer, then he will get exactly what he needs and won't have to wait 10 years and then buy it from IBM. And the way we approach it, and we already have a few conversations like that with very big manufacturing organizations, although we are preferred to work with mid-range right now. They're faster to make decisions. But the idea is that now, after do the initial fundraising, now we're approaching usually privately held manufacturers and saying, guys, you can be a design partner and you can invest. We are promising that all the money that you invest will go to your project, And by growing with the company, first of all, you will be a stakeholder in the company. Second, you will get the product.
Fantastic.
And I think, yeah, for us, it will allow me to dedicate all the money to the research and development and not waste any money on sales and marketing for the next 2-3 years. And for others, I think we don't have time for all these play around games because the world is eating. So we really have to work fast.
Yeah.
So from our side, this is what we're doing.
Fantastic. And we do have people in our crowd that are in the manufacturing market. And so if you're somebody in the manufacturing market, either an owner, an investor, and you want to make sure that you aren't going to get hit with extra taxes because of your carbon footprint, and you want to become more efficient and smart with green technologies, I recommend connecting to Leo and what he's doing in Factoree. And yeah, so first of all, more power to you. It's always exciting to hear about your latest project. And thank you so much for what you're doing and have done with the Israeli Innovation Institute. It's amazing work. And thank you for being with us today. There are many small businesses in Israel that are creating amazing products that never make it to the shelves of the stores where you shop. Unfortunately, there's an insidious campaign growing around the world calling to boycott Israel. And these small business owners see their potential market shrinking from day to day. What can we do about this? So Arise exists to make meaningful connections between friends like you in the international community and the economy of Israel. When you sign up to become a member of the Arise Alliance, we will send you on a quarterly basis a gift box filled with cosmetic products, culinary products, fashion products, amazing stuff made in Israel. Your family's gonna love this. Your favorite time every quarter is gonna be to stand around and discover what did you receive this quarter from Israel. And it's just a great way to weave Israeli products and the reality of Israel into your everyday life. Make sure you become a member today and help support small businesses and create jobs in Israel. Thank you.